We already did the restroom break, so let's pretend it happened. You ready for this? Ready for chapter 7? Soft skills? We're gonna get real corpo minded on this one, okay? So I'm gonna sound like I work for a company and I'm managing it. Questions. Hard skills and soft skills. What are they? Hard skills are technical knowledge or training such as programming, understanding how to work a program, or in this case, it would be artistic knowledge like knowing how to draw, right? That's what hard skills are. These are more easily quantified or measured. Someone can reasonably say that someone is good enough in their draftsmanship to perform a duty. Soft skills are traits and behaviors as opposed to knowledge you possess. Social behaviors, communication, attitudes, mindsets, etc. So on, right? These skills are more difficult to prove proficiency in, but are no less important than hard skills. Soft skills will help to connect with other people, help you learn more easily, and communicate ideas better. Now, going back to what we were talking about with the college degrees, when I said you're more likely to get hard skills than soft skills, this is what I'm talking about. You can learn networking and soft skills by working with people and talking to people, but the coursework's going to be more the hard skill focus. Soft skills get skipped a lot in game dev. People are like, you just be good at the art, you know what I mean? You just design well and that's enough. Working in a team at scale, which is to say much, much larger than expected, like my art team is 200 people because we're making an MMO scale, soft skills are going to be important. Generally, you want the best of both of these worlds, as both are necessary to navigate the world of game dev. However, people tend to focus more on hard skills than soft skills, which is a mistake that led the industry down some dark paths in the past. Let's see, sexual assault issues and so on and so forth. Like, they're stemmed from a lack of soft skills and empathy and understanding. Okay? Conversely, having only soft skills will cause just as many problems. Now you can't do your job. Good job. These have the effect of keeping someone on the team because they're charismatic or pleasant, even though they don't possess the hard skills to perform their tasks. Both of these suck. Soft skills and hard skills collaborate to create better game dev. Let's get into it. Soft skill categories. Teamwork. The reality of a studio position is you will be working with team members and dealing with cross-discipline communication. You need to be prepared to listen and collaborate on ideas and execution. Working with others entails a collection of soft skills that need to be developed. You won't get by being an egomaniac who wants to be left alone and never spoken to. It's just true. When you're working in a team, you need to communicate, and too many people will go onto a team and go, well, I'm really good, so I shouldn't have to put up with someone. I shouldn't know how to write an email. I don't need to talk to producers. And they act like everyone's bothering the hell out of them when they just say hello. You can't be that person. You can, but you shouldn't be, especially in this climate, right? Teamwork creates a support system. It creates better social relationships, but also helps the team run smoother. If someone else needs support or you need support, you can be there for each other. I told you this is going to sound really, really corporate, but you can't try to go into studio work and just get away with the old Twitter approach of I just am difficult to get along with. No, don't be. Work on it. At least try. Working together doesn't mean you have to be friends. However, sappy as it may sound, the reality is you will need to get out of your shell and collaborate. Communication. Miscommunication tends to cause more problems than almost anything else in team-based workplaces. And in my experience, that's absolutely been the case. Miscommunication and moreover a lack of willingness to try to communicate reasonably and instead selfishly just being like, "Oh, I don't give a fuck. Get off my back, man." And then going home and like complaining that everybody sucks and not realizing maybe it's you. that's that's been a big issue. Try not to drown out the quality of communication with quantity. Don't just talk forever and say nothing. Knowing how to get to the heart of what you want to say and articulate it can avoid complications and unnecessary problems. Also, it'll stop a whole bunch of emails becoming meetings, like where you're just like, let's all talk for an hour about something that could have been 2 sentences. This counts for not just speaking, but also when you write. Using Slack or other forms of instant messengers within the workplace is extremely common, along with email. Add to that in-person discussions on Zoom or, God forbid, Microsoft Teams meetings, and you will quickly realize how much time will be spent just trying to understand and trying to communicate. As we get into more and more remote positions, especially, this is doubly important. It's actually easier to communicate in person for a lot of people because there's social cues, and you can see people's faces easier and such. For me, it's easier to communicate not in person a lot of times, but mileage varies. The point is, be ready to and equip yourself to navigate these kind of situations. This is probably one of the most overlooked arenas in game dev preparation for people that I talk to, where they're just like hyper focusing on resume, hyper focusing on portfolio, all of that. And they aren't trying to focus on understanding people, communicating better and more efficiently so that they can work in a team. They act like they're going to work on their own, and then they start to sometimes imagine that they're the most important person in the world and everyone should accommodate them. If I have somebody in an interview and they're kind of signaling that everybody should just put up with them, I don't want to work with that person. That sucks. Good communication is not just understanding how to get a point across or clearly present a solution. It's also understanding others and creating situations where coworkers feel understood and respected. All the time that people go online and complain, nobody's listening to me, nobody respects me. You got to be able to reciprocate that. That's not saying that's why they're not respected. I'm saying like that's the result of people not having good soft skills. In management, this is a huge deal. And so many managers never got soft skills. They just got results. Adaptability. Do you feel like you're in a corporate meeting yet? Buckle up. Adaptability means flow with changing circumstances. The means fuck man. You try talking for like 3.5 hours. You can flow with changing circumstances. Being able to pivot on a project or direction, be it in concept or execution, is important. Things change quickly in game dev. Problems are discovered and people change their minds constantly. Constantly. That is very normal. Even specialized positions will have to change course often on the job. Knowing how best to personally navigate this will arm you with resilience, confidence, and save you loads of stress. So really, it's just kind of reiterating what we're saying. You're going to deal with pivoting a lot. Things are going to change directions a lot. People are going to change their minds, and it's not always going to be a bad idea. Sometimes, this isn't working. We need to do it this way. You need to be equipped to mentally go with that flow sometimes and navigate it, and you need to be ready for those changes and understand how you deal with that so that you can deal with it in a way that other people can deal with you, if that makes sense. Adaptability is not just the ability to change course, but also the ability to bounce back from failures or adversity. It also helps you in the bigger picture of career opportunity and knowing when it's time to move on from a specific type of work or place of employment. The more you understand how to communicate with other people, the more you're going to understand yourself and how you like to be communicated with, which will also define your choices. This means that you're going to start to understand, should I deal with this, or is this a bad decision or a bad situation that I should get away from? Problem solving. This one can seem like a no-brainer, but it can be a difficult skill to get good at, especially for people who are only used to reading tutorials or being told how to do things. This is actually more of a problem now than it seemed to have been previously. As more and more artists are kind of learning only through tutorials and not personal exploration, which is to say, like, before going like, how do I use this program? I'll try to do something with it. Or how do I draw a shirt? I'll try drawing a shirt. They just go and look up tutorial for drawing shirt and just copy that, which is fine. And you can learn that way. More and more people aren't solving problems. They're more finding solutions from other people, right? Which is a different skill. You want to get to a point where you can understand issues more easily and come up with reasonable solutions on your own or in collaboration. That last part is important. Game dev studio jobs are team jobs. You're not going to get your special little cubicle most of the time. If you do, awesome. Actually, that's rad. I hope you do. The ability to problem solve efficiently is super important, even if you're a solo dev. I mean, because obvious, right? Now you're solving everything. This is a lot of what designing and working in teams to create games and art will boil down to. Help cultivate the skill. You can work on things by yourself to get in the mindset of overcoming challenges with creative solutions. Working on anything from concept designs with clear goals or an indie game project will get you used to problem solving. This is pretty clear cut. I'd say this is the most obvious part, right? You're going to have to solve problems, but it really is get used to actually thinking about things and not just looking up solutions, because you're going to end up in really involved discussions in studio game dev, and you're going to need to be prepared to not just talk fluff. You know what I mean? The benefit of problem solving on your own is there's the greatest room to experiment and find what would work for yourself, as well as what might be suitable in a collaborative environment. Guess what? When you problem solve on your own, you also improve all those other things we talked about earlier. So yeah, all of this can get used to taking big and elaborate problems. Wow. Taking big and elaborate problems and simplifying them by breaking them into smaller, more easily managed tasks, which is the best way to go about it. Don't get overwhelmed. And this is like when you're learning art, this is one of the number one things that I actually recommend to people, right? Is how do I learn anatomy? Well, don't necessarily learn the whole body at once. Like learn the form, learn gesture. Today I'm going to practice hands, maybe just fingers, you know what I mean? Practice the head shape. Take it in parts, and you can do that with anything. From how will I turn this head I'm drawing to how will I create and implement an entire modular system for my big-ass dungeon crawler game project? Who does that? All of this will help you develop your skills and how they relate to project items better. This is what a lot of designing and working in teams to create games and art will boil down to. Cultivate the skill, and you work on things by yourself to get into the mindset of overcoming challenges with creative solutions. I know there's a lot of text. Stay with me. Working on anything from concept designs with clear goals or an indie game project to get used to solving. It also makes you more creative. I think I just repeated myself there, but it also makes you more creative, which leads to creativity. Being able to come up with ideas and solutions that are interesting and useful takes a lot of creativity. This is obvious, but what we're talking about here goes farther than looking at Pinterest and combining ideas that you see there. It means you can come up with your own ideas, which in a concept position becomes paramount. This is really important. The difference between a okay or good concept artist and a great one is being able to actually cultivate ideas. And that is both a hard skill and a soft skill, if you think about it. The most successful and inspiring devs are the ones who can create the concepts people look for on Pinterest, not the ones who find them and copy them. The value of an artist plummets when they have to source all their ideas elsewhere. Gen AI, whoops. Anyway, this is even more important now that Gen AI is in the picture. Wow, that's weird. It's like I thought it into being. Organization. Being organized will not only help your own work, but help keep the rest of the team from slowly becoming your enemies as their hearts fill with hatred every time they have to look for your files. This is a skill that's really, really important. And I've run into this with team members a lot. You're going to end up with file sharing systems and cross-pollinating your work, and people don't organize their files. And I'm not talking just about layers. I'm talking about naming conventions, placements. They don't want to have to put them in the correct places and programs, and it just becomes a nightmare. You can do simple things like color coding your layers in Photoshop and ensuring you're keeping to naming conventions other disciplines prefer. In fact, don't ignore that shit, okay? Or you become the secret, like, villain. Being able to keep your work organized, properly labeled, and in the correct places makes everyone's job easier, and it helps keep work from getting lost. This also contributes to prioritizing tasks and managing your time. Man, I really wish someone wasn't just skateboarding back and forth outside while I'm trying to talk. So this is another one of those cases where a lot of people will be like, I'm just not organized. You need to remember that's kind of like going into a sandwich shop and going, I just don't like putting food together, so I won't learn how to do it. You're going to need to learn how to do this kind of stuff if you want to go into game dev. Now, certain teams will have producers that will take on a lot of these tasks for you or help you with them. It really just kind of depends, but try and prepare yourself for the idea that you're going to need to be a little more organized. Don't go into jobs like this with the excuse of, nah, I'm just not an organized person, and then put no effort into it, because now you're starting to cross the line of you're not an organized inclined person to you're purposely staying disorganized because you're putting zero effort into finding a solution for it, right? It also avoids people being handed a file labeled like this. It's the go-to joke, but it's a joke because it's true. And you can do this on your own, but when you're handing off files, right? Like maybe don't. Seems simple, but trust me, this is an important one. It also relates to time management. This one gets skipped over by a lot of people, and to be fair, there can be teams that have producers who can help with or completely handle the scheduling side of this. In reality, you should be able to understand how long something, or at least in a ballpark figure, will take you to do and be able to speak on it. Understanding what you can deliver on a given amount of time and how best to use that time is important. And it's something a lot of people from freelance don't usually have, which is good time management or expectations, because you're kind of like, you're not really on the clock. You're like, I'll have it done end of day. And that can help. But you're going to want to kind of be a little bit more mindful of how long things take so that you can stay on schedule, because you're going to start bottlenecking people on a studio game dev pipeline if you don't. The expectation isn't knowing how every specific second will be spent. If they're asking every single second, that's a red flag, by the way, just so you know. You just don't want to be the one saying a task will take 1 week and then have it bloat to 3 or more weeks and spend far too much time on something that doesn't matter over a priority task that others are waiting on. It sounds like common sense, but it is a skill. And I like to point out that this is a skill. You don't just expect people to do this. You have to put effort into it. Some people can naturally do this, but it's okay if you're not good at this. Just put effort into getting good at it, right? All of these are soft skills for a reason, and they're a skill. Part of good time management is recognizing how and when you personally work best so you can meet your deadlines. That means that if you have the wiggle room to go, oh, I actually work best when I have some focus time between these hours or whatever, sometimes you can have those conversations with your team. And if you show that the output matches the accommodation, then you're good. Some teams don't like that. Be wary. Feedback. Learning to receive feedback is its own personal journey. It can be hard to receive negative feedback, and frankly, nobody's going to want to hear it. This is probably the most talked about one, right? People just talk about this in learning art and anything, but feedback is a huge part of being on a team. Like, if you aren't aware, especially on an art team, you're generally going to have feedback days and meetings where everybody just kind of goes over everything, and it's encouraged that you get feedback, meaning even if people normally wouldn't have feedback, you're going to get it, right? So you need to be prepared for what that means and how to navigate that and parse that, and that is, again, it's a skill. Understanding what it instead of is helpful, what is not, and how to apply feedback is one of the most heavily used skills in game dev. Nobody wants to be judged or have their work, or by way of it, possibly themselves, disliked. That's just obvious. However, projects are full of this stuff, and if you're gonna panic or lash out when you receive criticism on your work, you're either not gonna last or you'll become a terror to work with, or both. Okay, key point here. Again, you don't get to go, well, I just don't get feedback. There's a lot of real self-ascribed legends that are like, I'm above feedback or whatever, but that's actually a bad trait to have. You need to work with a team. You need to be ready to have feedback, because sometimes it's not even about, did you do it wrong? It's, does your leadership recognize that this is going in the wrong direction, or you could plus it in some way? And that's kind of what you're getting paid to do. This is a job. This does not mean you should have to accept criticism wrapped in abusive packages. Definitely don't do that, speaking of red flags. But it does mean you need to be ready to adjust or communicate reasons for what was done, and be open-minded to change and suggestions from colleagues and leads. That's the job. Okay. And again, it's a skill. It's okay if you're not good at this now. It's okay if you have to admit to yourself, I am not good at taking feedback. But it's not okay if you then stop and go, but I want to go into this environment and I'm going to put zero effort into getting better at this. That's what all of these soft skills are going to come down to. Receiving feedback means recognizing when feedback is useful or useless, or even being weaponized. Learning the difference can take time. That's its own special little skill, okay? Because you'll get really like industry vets or big names come by and give you feedback, and sometimes they are bad at giving feedback. Their soft skills sucks. And now you have to sit there and go, was this bad? Or should I listen to this? Or do I care? And that's That's the name of the game, baby. This is something you need to think about. It's not just resumes and portfolios, okay? Is the feedback excessively vague? Is it scolding instead of guiding? Will this help you or the work improve, or is this just confusing? Sometimes you're dealing with someone who's simply bad at communicating. Sometimes you're dealing with an asshole. Pause for effect. That is, it's, this is the food for you to think, to kind of chew on, right? These are the questions you should be asking. If you're like, man, I don't like this feedback, run it through this filter. Is it vague? Is it actually feedback? Or are they just like, make it better? It's bad. That doesn't tell you anything, right? Are they just leveraging this to scold you, or are they trying to help you? Is this a biased opinion from a jerk, or is it somebody who's like, yeah, no, this is really important and you're maybe missing an aspect of this? Are they trying to work with you, or are they trying to work over you? Maybe you're dealing with both. Feedback should come from a place of honesty and empathy, whether you are receiving it or whether you're giving it. Receiving feedback, giving feedback, both skills interrelated. Okay? When giving feedback, be certain to consider, is this something that will make the project better? Or is this just something you personally feel should be adjusted? Remember, you're on a team, right? Knowing personal opinion versus more objective criticism that aligns with the project direction is important, will shape how you present your feedback. That's just a nice amount of corpo speak to say, keep your eye on the long goal and remember you're on a team. Don't just be like, well, I really wanted this to be purple and I needed to touch this aspect of it. Remember what I said in chapter 1? The bigger the team, the less personal agency you'll have. Get it when you can, but don't become a terror because you've decided you need to fight over every single thing and it's not even about being wrong. I had a situation even with my current job where I received like really organized long form feedback on 2 things I did in a row. And I just had a conversation with the lead. I was like, hey, I just was curious because this is good feedback. And it was. I was like, is this a lot of feedback to pivot because we feel that the project needs to go in this direction? Or is this, I've been doing this poorly and you're trying to correct? And they were like, no, everything's great. They're like, we just need to adjust in this direction. And we worked together to get there. And so that feedback doesn't bother me at all. And I had context for it. Remember, communication, right? You don't have to, you can always ask questions. And if you can't, that's a red flag. Just as important is the words you use to present your feedback. Don't say this sucks, even if you're thinking it. And if you think it, try to become the kind of person who doesn't think that way, okay? We're back to the asshole, right? Don't do that. There are more mature and reasonable ways to react to work that isn't good enough for what you or the team may think is needed. And this includes external contractors, okay? So a lot of times people are doing contract work and then the internal employees are like, they'll never hear our conversations or be in our meetings. They're just like, look at this shit. What a shitty person. That's the environment you're creating. And that's probably how people are talking about you when you're gone. Don't do it. Be clear and specific about what you're commenting on and why. Don't say vague things like needs improvement. Like that's, okay, how, right? That can leave someone without any actionable direction. Needs improvement. In what way? How? Is it too dark, too light, too small, too big, too round? What is it? Something you may hear related to feedback is the compliment sandwich, one of my least favorite things of all time. The compliment sandwich is a method some suggest to deliver criticism. You open with the bread, which is something positive or a compliment. Then you give them the meat, which is the critique and changes you want made. Then follow with more bread, another compliment, right? Like, oh, the lighting's really good. The anatomy really needs to be changed here. It's all wrong. But the colors you chose were good. And you may or may not mean that start and that end, but you really meant to say the middle. And now every time you give a compliment, it's suspect, y'all. This can work, but tends to be transparent and come off as insincere. It's best to be honest, but kind, so that when you give compliments, they aren't fabricated. It also makes compliments mean less when you, spelling error, see a formula known for softening the blow of what you actually want to say. Like it's like a bumper sticker. Everybody's like, oh yeah, just use the compliment sandwich. Sure, that's an easy go-to if you don't know how to formulate it, but maybe put some more effort in, right? It's very, it's very, I don't know. It starts to come off as condescending. Just learn a way to say things that isn't from a form letter to protect the fact that you didn't learn how to respectfully speak to people, right? Put effort in, be respectful. And I get it if you're like, look, I don't know how to do this, so I went to the compliment sandwich. But all you're really doing is going, I made up things or looked for things to say nice to hide the fact that I'm saying something that I need fixed and I don't want to kind of own up to it. You don't want to receive it that way, do you? So don't deliver it to someone else. Knowing how to gather your thoughts in a constructive way and then deliver that information is an important skill. Surprising amount of folks in a position to give feedback do not possess it. It's a tough balance to be both genuine but also helpful and clear, but it's always worth it. Okay. Giving feedback and receiving go hand in hand. Getting better at one helps you improve the other. You don't want to just blindly accept all the criticism, but you also don't want to be an arrogant dev who refuses all feedback. Experience will show you better how to find this balance and can be practiced with other artists on your own time. That last part is really where the improvement comes from. If you're like, but yeah, you're telling me all this stuff, Axer, but how am I supposed to get better at feedback? I don't know. Talk to people, be like, hey, take a look at this and listen to how they give you feedback, or give people feedback and be like, how does that feel? Or ask people what they do. You know what I mean? You can always kind of just plumb the depths of other people's opinions of what good feedback or how to deliver it looks like, and also ask, what do you not like when people give you feedback? And that can train you to work with teams. This is a big thing in leadership, and I have a section on leadership, but you may not all want to go to leadership, but it's just going to be a thing that you're going to have to deal with regardless. Take care, Karivana. Thanks. Understanding pipelines. Pipeline is simply an industry term for a chain of production divided into different steps and across different disciplines, usually. An example would be the process of starting a concept, then ending up with final 3D asset that is fully animated and implemented into the game. Even if your work is isolated, it helps to have context for your work within the larger picture of the project and understand where your work comes from, where it will go, how it will be handled, and by whom and what discipline. Basically, familiarize yourself with how things are done even outside of what you do. So if you're just concepting characters, it really helps to understand the pipeline of what happens to your concept after you hand it off to 3D. What are they going to do with it? That will inform how you make your concept. Ask questions, get acquainted with how different types of team structures work so you can know what other questions to ask if you start working in a studio. If you've never been in a studio, this is still good information for you to look into because it's going to make you do better on your interview. This can be simple, like what naming conventions to use for files to be handed off. The more you understand about the process beyond your immediate work, the easier your job will be, and the better you'll look, quite frankly, and the more people will appreciate that they don't have to explain to you that, you did a turnaround in 2D and it doesn't make sense in 3D space, and now the 3D artist has to do your job for you. Not that that ever happens, ever, all the time. Constructive complaints. Complaining to vent or feel better can be natural, but not in excess, okay? Then it just makes you a shitty coworker. If you're going to complain, try to control how much you do it, where and to whom you do it, and most importantly, do it with the intention of also finding solutions to these problems. This is a soft skill, okay? Blowing off steam, that's normal. But I will tell you that when I started in the industry, I did this way too much. I would bitch and complain without solutions in mind to feel better about frustrations I had. If you can work that into finding what those frustrations are and try to complain with the intention of solving those issues or in a more organized fashion, this will help you in the long run. Because if you only complain a lot and you're like, well, it's my right to do that. Yeah, you're in a corporate studio setting now. That's painting a target. When you have concerns or complaints, try to use that as a catalyst to figure out solutions instead of making it the problem of everyone who's at the studio with you. Venting with no real intention of finding a solution is best kept for personal friends or family that will tolerate it or you. It will keep you out of the shit. I'm talking to you firsthand, okay? I dealt with this. I was the complainy pants, and leadership really had a problem with me, and it hurt the beginning of my career because of it. I meant well, and my complaints were valid, right? It didn't matter that I was correct. It mattered how I was going about it. And so what leadership would see was just me complaining a lot, not coming up with solutions or whatever. It didn't matter how hard I was working and all that. I was actually a great employee outside of that. But, I had to learn the lesson that you don't do the freelance thing where you just like complain about everything, which I did a lot when I was freelance. General soft skills. Patience, empathy, reliability, motivation, respect. These are all soft skills. You get the idea. Sounds like a perfume ad. These reach beyond don't be a dick, but also don't be a dick, right? I'm also not saying be super nice to assholes. I'm saying try to be understanding and reasonable with people and don't decide that everyone aside from you isn't worth anyone's time. Empathy, objective look at yourself and the people around you. Don't tolerate red flags, don't tolerate jerks, but don't become one because you're selfish and decided you didn't want to put time into soft skills because you already spent all that time getting better at art. Don't be too casual. Too much information is a thing, especially if you're new. If you are too personal or too relaxed, as you might be around your best friends, this can cause tension with other people who feel like they don't want to be around that. Again, it's a professional setting, and people in corporate game studios can be away. All right, you'll get a lot of people like me and a lot of casual people and chill people, but you're going to get some people that are really uptight, which is interesting because it's video games, but you get all types of people. Don't cause tension where you don't need to. Feel it out. Try to remember you're in a professional setting, even if you're work from home. This includes don't draw porn at work. Seriously, this is a thing that's been a problem. And when people ask, like, oh, is it a problem to be in professional studio work and be a porn artist? No, dude, tons of people are adult artists that work in games, like tons. And a lot of them are really big named people, but they know better than to go, lunch break, my computer's facing everybody, time to draw some titties. Like, don't do that. Let others speak. That's a big one. That was a big one that we ran into problems at Blizzard with. Some folks have a real problem of only wanting to be heard. That's not how to get this machine to work properly. I will tell you now, I'm a pretty loud, talkative individual, and that was the result of not being listened to in the workplace. I was talked over constantly. I was bypassed in conversations because I was quieter and polite, and then I had to become a louder person because of it, and now I hate that, right? Just try and be respectful. And also another way to do that, and a cool soft skill that not everybody can cultivate because it takes a certain type of will or personality, is you can also help other people's be heard when they're talked over. Avoid being positive only at someone else or something else's expense. We went over that earlier, right? Don't be like, oh yeah, this game is great because that game is shit compared to it. Like, just don't become that because that'll start to paint everything. Avoid gossip. I know it's interesting, but just don't. It'll bite you in the ass. You're gonna think you're the special boy, and it's not gonna, but it will. The one thing you're gonna learn over time at corporate game studios is what you say will come back to you. All right? There are some things you're just not going to want to get into. Avoid it. It's going to sound liberating. Oh, I'm part of this. Or, oh, I'm on the right side of this. Blah, blah, blah. But if it's gossip and not active things you need to get involved in, just save yourself the trouble. Let my experience help you. Drop the ego. Always have a form of humility. Nobody wants to work with someone who acts like they should have the spotlight every second of the day. It also keeps you from learning efficiently when you give yourself the idea you are already the best. These are just basic humanity skills. But again, I'm going over them, not just because it's surface level stuff, but a lot of entry level people in studios just bypass this and don't think it's important. Portfolio is most important, but not being a shit is very important too. Be honest instead of faking your expectations. Nobody's going to know everything and nobody will be correct 100% of the time. So when you don't know something, say when you don't know something or you've made a mistake. Most teams aren't going to punish you for that. This is a soft skill. It's silly, right? But it is a skill to be able to know and say, I made a mistake or I am wrong. Don't do it. You know what I mean? So you gotta be willing to do that. Be willing to learn or know when to ask for help. You're part of a team, so you need to be able to ask for help if you need it. This is what leads, art managers, and producers and teammates are for. Well, one of the many reasons and why. Another thing, knowing when to ask for help, that's a ego thing a lot of times, or people who are just afraid of being seen as weak. You need to be capable of doing this. And if you're on a team that silences you if you do that or punishes you, that's the team's problem. Don't give hard answers to things you don't know to appear confident. This is going to cause you so much trouble if you do this. You have no idea. Know when to take a step back from something. This is another important skill. Any job can be overwhelming. Game dev is definitely no different. I mean, if you even read games media, it's one of the things they're actually honest about. It can be rough. Sometimes you need to remember to give yourself a break, clear your head. Being able to understand when and how to do this is a soft skill, and a lot of people do not have it. Okay? Good. We made it. Q&A time. If there are any questions, please ask them now. I know that was a long one. I know, like I said, that was very corpo speak and very wordy in that direction. But I personally feel very strongly that soft skills are something that most people seem to avoid. And you can save yourself a lot of time by understanding what working in a team is, right? So there you go. Bucky says, here's a question. I have a hard time extended social interaction. Case in point, I'm easily drained, constant social interactions found at retail jobs. This falls under the relevant soft skills. And you mentioned to work on them, the obvious solution is to touch grass and the like. Do you have other things or means or methods to acquire soft skills? I'm strapped for time. In my free time, I'm trying to get started in the art environment. So part of that goes back to, actually, I probably should have highlighted a little bit more, which is understanding how you work best, which then can inform the conversations you have with yourself and others about what you need to improve on. You shouldn't really need to be social 120% of the time. I work with a lot of people who have low social batteries, and it may not seem like it because I stream and I put on airs or whatever, but my social battery can be pretty short for anyone that I don't intimately know. At work, I function best when I'm at very few meetings and not having to talk a lot. You have to be capable of doing it when you need to do it, but that doesn't necessarily mean you need to do it all the time. So I would say just kind of investigate, when do you seem to work best beyond just when I'm by myself and not talking to anybody. Like, how do you find that your social battery is charged a little bit longer when you communicate a certain way or when you're working on certain things and stuff like that? So if you can identify that, you can start to kind of figure out what you can lean towards. And then beyond that, just work on extending it in little bits if you can, by talking with people or working in situations like that. It's okay if you never 100% every single soft skill, right? The goal is just try to improve them if you feel you're lacking in those areas. Be mindful of the fact that these will come up. These are things that you're going to have to work on, right? So as long as you can look into that and work on it piece by piece, then you're good. That doesn't really fully answer your question. I recognize that, because there is no perfect answer to that. I can't give you like a course list of what you should be doing to become more social. It's just, I would say the first step is recognizing, like, I do want to kind of improve this, and looking at it that way through how have I seen this extend my social battery, and leaning into that. It's a little loose because I don't have a perfect answer. I wouldn't say forced small talk per se, but more like, are you at least capable of talking at length about a project you're working on? You know what I mean? Because a lot of times people in meetings will just be quiet until it's their turn to talk. You know what I mean? But you have to be capable of, if a producer comes up to you, and let's say you're in person and not remote, and taps you on the shoulder, or you can be like, don't tap me on the shoulder, whatever. But you know what I mean? They come up to you and they're like, hey, the timeline for this is like this. Do we need to adjust it or whatever? Where's this? That you're like capable of communicating with them and going like, oh, well, it's actually this, and this is why we're, without freaking out or biting their head off or whatever. You need to be able to communicate and be present. And that's not necessarily a constant, right? It's more being addressed towards people who are like, well, I just don't want to talk to anybody, so I'm going to go on a team of 80 people and just not talk to anyone because I do great pictures. And it's like, you can do the greatest picture in the world, you're still going to have to talk to somebody, my friend. Like, at that point, solo dev is probably what you want. Then you don't need to talk to anybody, but you probably will, because marketing's a thing. But anyway, that's a thought on that. DNA says, have you had to mediate disruptions in teams personally when things boil over? Does that tend to go right to HR, company equivalent? So that's more of a leadership thing. Um, every team I've been on has had arguments or something. Even my current team has had disagreements. Generally, that's going to get pushed to leadership, leads, directors, HR if it gets bad, whatever, for disruptions that boil over specifically or altercations. But you do need to be equipped as a person to know when you shouldn't be having an argument and just kind of go, hey, I'm going to back out and not take bait, right? Because the one thing that usually catches people off guard when they join like a big well-known studio is how many people there aren't professional in their behavior. Like that's a big one that I got when people joined Blizzard. They're like, whoa, some of these people are acting like little children, and you're like, yeah, they don't have the soft skills, but they got hired anyway. You know what I mean? And you need to be prepared to go, whoa, this is not appropriate, or I'm not getting involved in that, or you're not being the right kind of person I should talk to, at which point you can escalate it to leadership or just back off and let people breathe a little bit or whatever. And that is a skill to recognize that, and it's a skill to be able to do it as well. But yeah, that's pretty normal because just like in any other arena, game devs are people. They're all just different types of people. And the whole idea that everyone at Riot's a consummate professional, everyone at Blizzard is a consummate, that's a lie. Uh, I've worked with just purely awful people when I was at Blizzard, like just really wretched assholes. And a majority of people were not them. But I mean, I had a known altercation with a director when I was there, and you have to be able to recognize when somebody's abusing power, when somebody is talking to you inappropriately, when you're going to get into it and it's not worth it. Are you getting involved in gossip? Are you whatever? So, there you go. Naughty says, how do I deal with a superior or a group of high-ranking members with low soft skills? So I'm going to go into that in a later chapter. So I'm going to kind of only touch on that a little bit more. But really it is that anybody who's in management or as a superior has power over you that can easily be abused, right? And management realistically shouldn't have low soft skills. But the cool thing is people who aren't attached to a project or also don't have good soft skills will put people in management who don't have soft skills when management is almost a soft skill primary job. Like it's going to be at least 50% of what you should be doing because it's people management, right? It's project management, but it's also people management. And when they have low soft skills, sometimes you're trapped and it sucks. But other times you can discuss through it. I've got a chapter later that's going to deal with that. But you generally have to equip yourself to recognize when you're perceiving an abuse of power versus when it is an abuse of power. And there's a nuance to that. And I'll get into that a bit later if you can permit me. I know I said I was going to go an hour, but I'm going to do one more chapter before we stop. I think we're good on questions right there. Right. As Cami is saying, don't take bait. Just don't do it. All right, we're going next.